All right, so good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. Again, I'm Christian Ryan Bautista from DIMSU MLUC, and I am tasked to report on Singapore English. Yeah. So let me present to you my presentation. So I hope it is visible in your screens. Okay. All right. So let me start first with the context of British colonization. So in the context of British colonization, ladies and gentlemen, English speakers move around the world. We all know that, carrying and spreading the English language. So this is how the English language also reached Singapore when it was acquired by British in year 1819. So as a language of colonizers, English spread throughout the country and was considered valuable for the country. So valuable for the country, what I mean is the development. So it was retained as an official language of Singapore. So if we will also try to consider the linguistic situation in Singapore followed the scheme of the multi-ethnic character of the country, we can say that it has three large communities of Chinese, the Malays, and the Indians, but also there's something 1.4% of other ethnicities like Europeans, Arabs, and even Asians. So when Singapore gained independence in 1965, four official languages were recognized. So we have Mandarin, we have Malay, we have also Tamil, where the mother tongues of the people of Singapore, along with English, of course, as an additional official language. So as a language, Singapore English or Singaporean English holds great significance in the country, considered to be the gateway to international communication and commerce. So if you can see on my screen, okay, but also it is also considered the language of science and technology. And one of the practical reasons why English was retained as an official language was the complexity of changing the entire vocabulary and terminology in domains such as law, where an established vocabulary already existed. Just like that. Now, Singapore English is used as the main language of profession, but it has also become the everyday language that one third of Singaporean use, particularly at home and of course at work. And one of the main reasons why English had such widespread in Singapore is that the fact that English was established already as the main language of education. Okay? So, making this communication between colonizers and the locals possible, ganun yung naging outcome yan. So, bilingualism in Singapore, which was made compulsory in the education system in 1960, assured cohesion in the language use, making English as the lingua franca for all people inside the country, but also secured mother tongue survival since the students were obligated to learn another language at the same time. Okay, so as the medium of education, ladies and gentlemen, provided the Singaporeans with bigger opportunities both in profession and of course travel, and gave them a competitive edge in the global community. So if we will try to search on the net the the rank of Singapore with regards to English speaking. They are really one of the top countries who speak the English language. Okay, so Standard English is indisputably considered to be a language that provides opportunities to those using it, both in, of course, socio-economic, both in political areas, and provides access to information and media that otherwise would be unintelligible. All right? So, if we will try to think on the general scope of standard English in Singapore, it is actually used by everyone, and particularly in the government. So it is used by the government for matters of state and law, and for administrational purposes, just like that. And it is also the language of education, while it is also considered to be the high variety of English in Singapore. So, as the high variety of English in Singapore, it was mainly used by people of higher education, working mainly in the most prestigious occupations, just like just like law, okay, or even in teaching professions, even in other professions which uses uh, the standard English language. However, the great language diversity in the country affected English and the language acquired characteristics from other languages that were present in the same environment. So, the English language was also affected by ethnic and socio-economic status of those using using it, just like that. So this had, as a result, what happened? So the appearance of the Creole language, if we say Creole, it is a stable natural language that develops from the simplifying and of course mixing different language, okay, into a new into a new kind of language or a new one within a fairly brief period of time. So languages have been mixed, which needed to make communication among these people possible. So ganyan yung nangyari. So this variety of English is now what we called Singlish. Okay, I think this was introduced before by Doc Martha, I think, with regards to the word Singlish. Okay, so this is Singapore colloquial English or Singlish. So this is mainly used by those general people, especially on those uh, rural areas of Singapore. Now, this Singlish actually features substantial variations from the standard English. So it is a more informal variety. So if we will try to compare standard English to Singlish, standard English is a formal variety, and Singlish is an informal variety that is used mainly by for colloquial. If we say colloquial, it is used in ordinary or familiar conversation. It's not formal, just like that. So it is used mainly for colloquial situations and, of course, interactions. Thus, a state of diglosia, okay, a state of diglosia are used under different conditions within a community, for example, or often by the same speakers, just like in Singapore. If we say a state of diglossia, this is actually a situation in which two languages or two varieties of the same languages are used under different conditions within a community. Okay, so Nangyayari yan sa sa Singapore. So a term diglossia is usually applied to languages with distinct high and low varieties. So just like what we have said a while back, that Singapore has two kinds of English varieties. We have the standard and the Singlish. So this is what we are talking today at this point. Okay, so it has high and low varieties, just as with the setup of Singapore. And this appeared in Singapore concerning the use of their English language. So the two varieties, the standard and the Singlish, are both used at the same time in the country, according to the situation and the functions served at that time. Since standard English is considered to be of a um, higher status. Okay? So English or Singlish naman is deemed as a lower status variety, used mainly in colloquial and informal situations. So that's the difference between the two. Now, the colloquial version of English, which is the Singlish, has developed through contact, okay? And it is used by a great number of people in many situations and in many areas of Singapore. So the variety has been influenced by many other varieties present in the community, just like the Malay, just like Chinese. Okay, Chinese is Mandarin, just like that, since it has been created as lingua franca between people of different native tongues, of course, in their effort to communicate. So the use of both of these varieties, the standard English and the Singlish, has caused a conflict, okay, that mainly concerns the colloquial version of the English language. Okay, now the standard English has become localized variety of English in Singapore. So if we relate this to British standard English variety, it does not, however, show great variation from the British standard English variety. And it can compare to other varieties of English around the world in the sense that the only semantic variations that can be found mainly concern localized words and situations. Okay? Now, let's move on to the characteristics of English. So, on this part, we can see how Singlish or the Singaporean colloquial English was used or are used or is used in Singapore. So if you can see on the screen, okay, the $2 oni, this one is a street vendor or said by a street vendor, or street vendor might say to you in Singapore if you will go there. Okay, so $2 only, this one, just like that. So a local might reply, "What? So expensive? So expensive one, cannot le?" Just like that. That's the way how they talk in Singapore. So $2 only, this one. Oh, so if you're familiarized with on how Chinese and Malays talk with regards to the English language or with regards to the speaking of English, okay, this is how they pronounce their words, particularly in English. So $2 only, this one. So a street vendor might say to you, and a local might reply, "What? So expensive, and so expensive one, cannot le?" Just like that. So while this might sound like a broken English, it is actually an example of Singlish. Okay, this is actually an example of Singlish. So this is the highly complicated English Creole that we are talking a while back, wherein a mother tongue formed from the contact of two languages, okay, spoken in Singapore. So it's staccato, okay. Off grammar patois is the subject of much bemusement for visitors to the country, and it's almost impossible for outsiders to imitate. It is really very impossible for a visitor or a foreigner. If they will go to Singapore, then they will hear this kind of Singapore English, okay, or the Singlish. So it is very impossible for them to imitate, just like that. So it's complicated. Okay, it's complicated. Now, just like what we have said earlier, Singlish comes from the mixing of different official languages or Singapore official languages, particularly English. We have Mandarin, we have Malay, we have Tamil, just like that. So at this point, the grammar of Singapore English began to mirror. Okay, it began to mirror the grammar of these languages. For example, a modern Singaporean could say, "I go, I go bus, or I go bus stop, wait for you," just like that, to mean that he will wait for you at the bus stop. So, if we will try to examine the outcome of this statement, this phrase could translate into the Malay or Chinese without having to change the grammatical structure of the sentence. So ulitin natin, if we have heard a Chinese speaking in language in the second language or the English language, this is actually how they say or express themselves using the English language. Okay, even Chinese who speaks for particularly Tagalog or the Filipino language, for example, it's the same thing. Okay, putol-putol siya. All right. So now words from uh, words from the language from other languages became appropriate into the Creole as as well, creating an entire Singlish lexicon, okay, that is used today. So the word, for example, the word among or angmo, just like that, for example, is a Hokkien. It's a Hokkien word which literally translates to red hair. For example, it's a red hair, but it is used in Singlish to describe people of Caucasian descent, okay, or descent. Another one is the Malay word makan, okay, makan is commonly used to mean food. For example, pagkain, okay, or in Singlish form, it is the act of eating, just like that. So it's quite related to our Iloco term makan, just like that, which is food. Okay, this is makan or makandatoy, or this is makan. Okay, which is food actually. Another one is the Tamil word gundo, okay, or gondu, okay, which means fat. All right. In its original language, it is used in Singlish to describe a person who is not very smart. So in formal settings, okay, Singlish tends to be toned down into its acrolectal form. If you say acrolectal form, from the word acrolect, from the word itself, acrolect. So the variety of speech that is closest to a standard prestige language, especially in the area in which a Creole is spoken. Okay, so the Singlish tends to be toned down to its acrolectal form. All right, so Singlish words and its grammatical structure actually are already eliminated. Okay, the structure, the grammar structure already eliminated, and only the only left was the the accent. Okay, so the only accent remains. In the day-to-day, however, a more colloquial form of Singlish is used. Now, when it comes to the attitudes, okay, of people of Singapore, and no one denies that Singaporean English is vital for the country, of course. It is very helpful for them since it provides communication with other countries, and it is also widely used inside the country for communicational purposes. However, even if no one can deny that the advantages of using standard English, there are a lot of people against the use of the Singaporean or the Singapore colloquial English or the so-called Singlish. So, the government of Singapore is actively working to minimize the use of Singlish, and they've even labeled it as inferior, okay, to the standard and a threat actually to the nation's development. So they don't accept Singlish based on the notion of variety that is not correct or proper. Thus, what happened here? They take measures towards its abolishment. So gusto nilang alisin. Okay? That's the reason why they made the so-called SGEM. So the SGEM, or the Speak Good English movement. So what is this Speak Good English movement? Okay? So from the screen itself, it was a SGEM, or Speak Good English movement. Okay? This is a Singapore government campaign wherein they encourage Singaporeans to speak grammatically correct English that is universally understood. Okay, it was actually launched by their prime minister, their prime minister on the year 2000, particularly April 29, by Minister Goh Chok Tong. Okay, it's their Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong. So the purpose was to ensure Singaporean recognize the importance of speaking the standard English language, and to encourage its usage. Okay, it is seen as a measure to counter the usage of the Singaporean or the Singapore colloquial English, or the Singlish. Okay, initiative aims to influence the Singaporeans to learn and use the standard with correct pronunciation as the only means to be able to understood by speakers of English everywhere, of course, but also promotes the use of the standard in domains of their everyday lives as a conscious choice that will offer them, of course, the advantage, okay, of using a higher status of language, not only as a means of communication, of course, but also as a means of expression. Okay, that's the most basic um, way they can um, encourage the Singaporeans to speak the standard English. So Singlish, okay, or the Singapore colloquial English is contempt, okay, as an unacceptable language that would deprive Singapore of a place in the global markets. So just like what we have said a while back, try to scan or try to search the rank of the rank of Singapore, even comparing that to Philippines. Okay, so they don't want to deprive Singapore of a place they don't want. Okay, because English is very unacceptable language for them. That will deprive, okay, Singapore on its place in the global market, but also because it is viewed as corrupted English. That's how they view that's how they view Singapore colloquial English. Okay, it is viewed as corrupted English rather than a distinct variety. So that will result, ladies and gentlemen, in Singaporeans that don't speak in any languages correctly. All right. So the Singapore or the Singaporean government believes that this hurts Singaporeans' image to the world. So that's how they take care of their image uh, globally, especially in the speaking of English or the standard English. And for this reason, ladies and gentlemen, they try to remove, they try to abolish, they try to spread out that Singlish is a corrupt, that's the lowest variety of, they don't even consider it as a variety, just like what we have said a while back, because it is a corrupt, okay, rather than a distinct variety, all right, sabi kanina. Okay? So they try to remove and abolish Singlish from the country's linguistic environment. All right? So that's the SGEM, or the Speak Good English movement. They are really maintaining their global image in terms of the speaking of the standard English. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you so much, Dr. Martha. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening my simple report. God bless everyone. See you again in our next meeting. Thank you.